All right, let's bring in a guy who knows a thing or two about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the one and only Scott Reynolds. Pewter Report. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Good, Jay. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was pretty calm Sunday night. I was lit. I was fired up yesterday, man, because with this defense, right? And I'm not just sitting here and blaming Todd. I just think, he's definitely not absolved of all the blame.
Yeah.
He deserves his fair share.
Yeah.
But I just look at this team as a whole, and you're going against a rookie quarterback, and they don't even punt, and it's just, it's like this was a winnable game. And I'm not taking anything from Washington, but Scott, this was a game that the Buccaneers, if the defense just plays adequate, they win this game.
No, you're exactly right, Jay. And I'm going to pull up some scores here from some other playoff games, and we'll talk about the outlier. The outlier is actually the Buccaneers game, right? The Rams last night beat the Vikings 27-9. The 9. Keep an eye on that. 9. The Eagles beat the Packers 22-10. The 10. Keep an eye on that. The Ravens beat the Steelers 28-14. Keep an eye on that. 14. The Texans really took it to the Chargers 32-12, even with the defensive score. Keep an eye on the 12. In the Bills, we saw them demolish the Broncos 31-7. The 7. Keep an eye on that. So the Buccaneers lost to the Commanders. But out of the losing teams in the wild card round, Tampa Bay scored the most points with 20 points. No other team that lost on wild card weekend scored 20 points, right? The highest scoring opponent, or I should say team that lost, was the Ravens, beating the Steelers 28-14. The Steelers had 2 touchdowns, right? So the Bucs had 20 points in the loss. All of the other teams that won dominated defensively, holding the Vikings to 9, the Packers to 10, the Steelers to 14, the Chargers to 12, the Broncos to 7. My point is, when you look at this Todd Bowles defense, the Buccaneers offense has had the superhero cape all season, right? From week 1, when they scored 37 points in Liam Cohen's debut, winning 37-20. And I'll remind you, the Commanders missed 3 field goals in the season opener. Maybe should have been 37-29. But for Todd Bowles' defense, there has to be a time when the offense is not wearing the superhero cape and you still win the game. At some point in time, you got to win a game 20-14, 20-17, 20-7, right? And we've seen other teams do that week in and week out. Matter of fact, the Kansas City Chiefs haven't even scored 30 points in any game this year, right? But you have to be able to win with defense. And when you're Todd Bowles and that's your side of the ball, you're the defensive play caller, that should have been the game where you get a stop or 2 or a takeaway or 2 and put the clamps down and say, you know what? Hey, Washington's defense came to play. There were some mistakes on offense. We still won, even though we didn't score 29.5 points per game, right? But that hasn't happened at any point this year. The teams that have struggled to score against the Buccaneers are also the teams that got blown out by the Bucs on offense, right? Look at the Chargers game, 40-17.
Right.
That's a prime example. The Giants game, 30-7. So there needs to be some balance here. Like, you have to be able to have a defense that is capable of holding teams under 20. And that just has not been the case at all with Todd Bowles' defense this year. The pass defense has been suspect. They've not gotten the takeaways. 7 interceptions on the year is embarrassing. It's ridiculous. And 6 of those have come in the secondary. Remember, Lavonte David had a pick against the Falcons. So to go 6 interceptions over 17 games, it's absurd. If Todd Bowles ends up staying, he at the very least must make some changes to his coaching staff, because cornerbacks coach Kevin Ross, I don't want to be age discriminatory whatsoever, okay? But I'm a believer in fresh ideas. The NFL is adapt or die. Evolution is king. And Todd Bowles played with Kevin Ross, the cornerbacks coach at Temple, okay? His position coach at Temple was Nick Rapone, who's the safeties coach in Tampa. All right, see where I'm going with this? You've got a lot of young assistants on the offensive side of the ball. Some of those guys came from college, right? Brian McClendon came from Georgia. He was at South Carolina and Oregon. And what having some youth brings to the table is you can relate to players probably a little bit more because they're not getting any older. I mean, they're young guys. Every time you're drafting rookies, they're 20, 21, 22, right? And so there's a relatable aspect there. You're reaching those players where they are. And then it's also, too, fresh new concepts. The NFL steals from college because college has got the most innovation because they get the most teams, right? So I'd love to see Todd Bowles do what Liam Cohen did, bring a bunch of younger guys in from college. You know, he brought Brian Picucci, the offensive line coach from Kentucky, who's working with Kevin Carberry. So you've got a nice mix of college and pro there. I just feel like there's such a stagnancy in Todd Bowles' defense that he's got to shake things up and maybe get some of these cronies that he has coached with for years that are probably yes men at this time. He needs to have some fresh ideas and some people challenge him in order to build a better mousetrap out there on defense. If he stays.
I'm with you, man. And I don't think it's age discriminatory because you look at a guy like Andy Reid. He's one of the older coaches in the league, and he is as innovative as they come.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where, all right, fine. If you don't want age to be held against you, then just start doing some different things. And
that's
right. Kind of it's the same copy and paste type of thing that's frustrating as hell when you watch this team. So do you change? You mentioned the coaches. Personnel obviously has to improve in certain areas too. Yeah. Do you think Todd Bowles is 100% for sure coming back next season?
No, I don't. I'm not sure, and I wouldn't be surprised if this drags out for a little bit, Jay. I wouldn't be surprised at all. As I said on the Pewter Report podcast yesterday, you know, in my 30 years of doing this, I've got 3 decades of covering this team. I walked in the door in 1995 with the Glazers, so I've been there as long as they have as an ownership group, and it's afforded me the ability to see them make coaching changes, Jay, at different times of the year. Okay, let's run through it real quick. I've seen them have the Black Monday guys, right, where you fire the coach at the end of the season. It didn't work out. Raheem Morris, prime example, right, back in when he coached. Same thing with Greg Schiano. He was fired in the last day, or I should say that the first day of the offseason when their season ended. Lovie Smith, same thing. But then you look back and you see some of these dates. Let's talk about John Gruden. John Gruden was fired 19 days after the season ended in 2008. That's a long time. Yeah. He didn't make the playoffs either. So he was fired January 16th. And a lot of factors went into that. We can get into it if you want, but I mean, that's just one example. Then when they fired Tony Dungy, which was the day after his playoff loss to the Eagles in Philadelphia back in 2001, technically it was January of 2002, but at the end of the 2001 season, it took him 37 days to finally pull the trigger and trade for John Gruden in the middle of February, right? So now we've got coaches that I've seen fired in late December, early January, late January with Gruden. Now we're talking about, you know, hiring or trading for Gruden after Dungy was fired. He didn't come aboard till mid-February, okay? What happened with Todd Bowles? He didn't become the head coach until March 22nd when Bruce Arians retired, right? Nobody kind of saw that coming. So my point is with the Glazers, we've seen them make coaching changes late December, early January, late January, mid-February, late March. So I don't know when they're going to come to the conclusion. Here's what I think will happen, though, Jay. I think that they're waiting to see what happens with Liam Cohen. I think if Todd Bowles comes back, it has to be, in their mind, with Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator, right?
Okay.
There are some reasons for keeping Todd. We can get into that if you want, but let's focus on Liam Cohen. They're not going to let him leave. I've seen this play out before with John Gruden and Raheem Morris in the early 2009 offseason. During that 19-day period, one of the factors for them firing John Gruden, there were several factors, but one of those factors was the minute that Raheem Morris, who was tabbed to be Monty Kiffin's replacement as defensive coordinator under Gruden, never happened because Gruden got fired. Raheem Morris had interviewed with the Denver Broncos for their head coach opening. That scared the Glazers because he was their backup plan. You know, do we keep John? Do we give him another year? Remember, they just gave John Gruden a 3-year contract extension.
Right.
Less than a year before, in January of 2008, his last season was 2008, they paid John Gruden for 3 years not to coach with a raise, okay? That was not an easy decision that they came to. But the minute that they had their plan B threatening to leave, which was Raheem Morris, who they thought at the time, maybe this is the new Mike Tomlin. Maybe he's the next Mike Tomlin. That's part of the reason why they made that switch. So I think if Liam Cohen were to leave, that puts Todd Bowles in some serious jeopardy. And I think that Glazers would, if push came to shove, make an offer to Liam Cohen if he gets a coaching offer, and look for the Raiders to be a team that's going to be interested in him next. They're interviewing John Spytek, the assistant general manager in Tampa. Tom Brady's been down here 3 times, Jay, to cover these Buccaneer games, most recently the Saints game. And what happened? Now he's got an interview with John Spytek out there for the vacant Las Vegas general manager position. And I wouldn't be surprised if Liam Cohen is one of those guys that Tom Brady wants to interview out there as well for the head coaching position.
So what would the Bucs do? Yeah, I guess what would the Bucs do for Liam Cohen? That
could prompt the team to make the move at that time.
And the move you're saying is Bowles out, Cohen elevated?
I believe so, yes. To me, that makes the most logical sense. If you look at the head coaches that have been fired so far, and I say fired because that's the key word here, right? Antonio Pierce, defensive-minded guy, Raiders. Gerard Mayo, defensive-minded guy, New England. Dennis Allen kicked things off, right? In New Orleans, he was the first firing. Robert Saleh with the Jets, defensive-minded guy. And then Matt Eberflus in Chicago, right? So those are 5 defensive-minded coaches that have been fired. Now, Mike Vrabel is replacing Mayo in New England, but he is a proven track record of being a walk-around coach. He's not really a defensive play caller like Todd Bowles is, right? But you can even see in Jacksonville, who fired Doug Peterson as an offensive-minded guy. They're looking for another offensive-minded guy to work with Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
They're not going for a defensive guy. The trend is hire the offensive-minded head coach, the play caller, to work with the franchise quarterback, whether that's somebody that you drafted in-house or you got, like Baker Mayfield, in free agency. Pair those guys together because it's easier to find a defensive coordinator than it is to try to find a new offensive coordinator because that's the flavor of the month, as it should be in the NFL with these owners. Look at the Buccaneers. If Liam Cohen leaves, Todd Bowles will be on his 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years. And you know this as well as anyone. Lightning doesn't strike twice in Tampa unless it's Kucherov, Point, Hagel, or Hedman, right?
Good
you know
point.
what I mean? So it just, if you think that the next guy out there is going to come in and walk in the door and just pick up where Cohen left off, 29.5 points per game, it didn't work that way. This guy's a special play caller. He's got a special knack for calling plays, for getting the running game to go from dormancy to lethal in one season is incredible. The assistants that he brought in, everybody's leveled up. Everybody, with the exception of Trey Palmer. If you look at the offense, Trey Palmer, who's the 3rd receiver last year, and I don't think he's going to be here next year. Every single player has leveled up. Cade Otton, Payne Durham, right, in the tight end room. Rashad White didn't level up, but only because of Bucky Irving, right? Sean Tucker leveled up. Baker Mayfield leveled up. The entire offensive line, the returning starters, all leveled up. Mike Evans leveled up from the touchdown standpoint. Chris Godwin was on his way of leveling up, right? Jalen McMillan came in as a rookie, and Brian McClendon got him to level up. That's what really good coaches do. It's not just the play calling. It's, can you find good assistants? Look at the big 3 in Tampa. Tony Dungy, look at his coaching tree, right? John Gruden was smart enough to keep Monty Kiffin, Rod Marinelli, Mike Tomlin, all those guys from the Dungy regime. And then look at some of the guys that he had on this coaching staff. Sean McVay was on this coaching staff here in Tampa, you know? And then look at Bruce Arians and how he was able to come in with a Super Bowl caliber coaching staff at the time and get the job done. So coaching matters. And a guy like Liam Cohen to hit on all of those assistants, Justin Peele in the tight end room, Brian McClendon at receivers, offensive line coaches, Brian Picucci and Kevin Carberry. You can't let this guy leave. So I think that's what the Glazers are looking for. They're looking for how much interest he gets so they can kind of make that argument, because Todd's a good guy. Todd's done a lot for this franchise, right? He's not a guy like Dirk Cutter or Lovie Smith or Greg Shannon that you're kind of like racing to fire, especially coming off 3 straight NFC South championships. There's going to be pushback from the national media. There's going to be, what are you doing letting Todd Bowles go? What's causing this? He's, all he's done is won 3, NFC South championships. How can you let this happen? Because this is evolve or die. That's adapt or die. That's what life is in the NFL.
And they're willing. You think they're willing to take that chance, though, Scott? Like, because I'm just playing devil's advocate, because all the guys you mentioned that got fired, none of them had division titles, right?
That's right.
Todd's won 3 in a row. Yep. And I think there's also something intangible, something that you can't quantify with numbers, the way that he's a leader of men, and the way that even though for 2 straight years this team went in the tank in the middle of the season, you know as well, people weren't murmuring, they weren't at these leaks that we see every single week in the NFL.
The team together.
People jumping off board. Like, there's a lot to be said about that.
No doubt.
And when you have guys like Lavonte and Mike Evans and Will Golston, regardless of whether they're here or not, but next year, those guys believed, even on the offensive side of the ball, Baker included, in Todd Bowles, that he wasn't going to waver.
That's right.
And I think for all the people that say, oh, he's no passion, he's no emotion, like, there's something to be said. And Kevin Cash isn't either. John Cooper isn't either.
He's got a steady hand.
There's an even keel to them. That my worry would be, okay, I understand that, because the only team probably that looks at it and goes, all right, we don't have a big time offensive play caller. I guess you could say McDermott in there when they made the decision to Joe Brady. And we'll see what his future entails. But look at Detroit. Dan Campbell's not the offensive play caller, but every single year we're going to be asking, when's Ben Johnson going to leave? And who wants to talk about, your offensive coordinator leaving and taking interviews every single year? So I understand that aspect. My concern would be if Liam Cohen, and they say this a lot in basketball, is when you move that 12 inches to the left.
That's right.
And you're the guy that makes all the big time decisions.
Yep.
And you're the guy that has to decide who's playing, who's not playing, disciplinary actions.
A lot more to it.
There's a lot more to it. And just because Liam Cohen's a great play caller, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean he's going to be a great head coach? Because he wouldn't be the first offensive play caller that moved to that other chair and just absolutely crap the bed. So you're telling me that the Glazers would likely kind of take that risk because this is kind of the trend of the National Football League. Also, combined with how talented he is. And he's a great guy too, right? I mean, he's an incredible guy.
No doubt. Yeah, and again, it goes back to my experience doing this. They have the track record for doing it. Tony Dungy, right? Tony Dungy turned this franchise around. He turned the Buccaneers into the Buccaneers and got them their first playoff win in 1997 that they hadn't had since the early 80s. Went to the NFC Championship game in 99, right? And then 3 straight playoff years, 99, 2000, 2001. And that was a tough call, right? But they did it because they felt they had reached the ceiling with Tony Dungy, that for whatever reason, he could not figure it out on offense. And remember, he had 3 offensive coordinators in his last 3 years. Mike Shula in 99. In 2000, it was Les Steckel. In 2001, it was Ty Christensen. And the offense stalled, and they lost to Philly in the first round of those 2 years in 2000 and 2001. And they just felt like they had hit a ceiling. And maybe they feel that way with Todd Bowles now. It's like,
do you think they have? Do you think they've hit a ceiling with Todd Bowles?
Yes, I do. I don't know that he has the game management ability to make the necessary calls or avoid the necessary blunders with the time management. It's one thing to call the timeout at the right point in time. It's another thing to call the timeout at the wrong time, right? And let the clock run or don't let it run. There's some real strategy to this that I just don't think, because you can go back to 2002. Look at the Cleveland Browns game in 2002, Brady's last year. They mismanaged the clock at the end, went to overtime against the Browns, should have driven down the field, kicked the field goal, and win it. It goes to overtime. They lost it to Jacoby Brissett.
David Njoku, I think, was right.
Yeah, David Njoku. Yeah, caught the touchdown on 4th down to send the game to overtime, etc. You look at that combined with the slide on defense.
Right.
30th or 31st in pass defense, whatever it is, only 7 interceptions, 6 in the secondary. That's the damning thing, right? Let's put it this way: if Todd Bowles was a walk-around coach, we would all be saying fire the defensive coordinator, right? Just because it wasn't good enough this year, and so he is the defensive play caller. I don't think he would surrender that, but if he does come back, and if I'm the Glazers, if I'm Jason Light, if Todd is going to come back, it must be with Liam Cohen, and he must make some changes on his coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. If he doesn't, then you kind of force my hand, and then we're going to go this route. But because there are so many different scenarios, what if this, then that, right? Mm-hmm. That's in play right now because Liam Cohen has the job interview for the head coaching job in Jacksonville. I think that the Raiders are going to come calling. There might be another team in the mix at some point. I think they're surveying the landscape, seeing how this works, because this is not an easy fire with Todd Bowles, given his reputation, what he's accomplished, what he's meant to the franchise. I think they're looking for the
right.
We had to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to take Liam, and Liam's 39, and he could be the next Sean McVay or the next Kyle Shanahan. And to your point, Jay, and you're not wrong, he might be the next Mike McDaniel. He might be the next hotshot guy that doesn't work as a head coach, doesn't pan out. Dirk Cutter didn't pan out here, right? He ended up ceding his play calling to Todd Monken the last year because he just wasn't working. But you don't know until you give these guys a chance, right?
They did it to Dungy. They did it to Dungy. They'll do it to Bowles, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's precedence to this. There's precedence in a lot of different aspects here. The waiting game, precedent. Yep. Firing the popular defensive-minded head coach that's done a lot for your franchise, there's precedent. Wanting to level up, wanting to go in the offensive direction, right? There's only been 2 Super Bowls, one here. Both of them were feisty offensive play callers, right? Even though Bruce Arians didn't call the plays, he was the orchestra of the offense. It was his playbook. He let Byron Leftwich. Actually, it was Tom Brady running the plays. Let's not kid ourselves here. But what I'm saying is if you're the Glazers and you're sitting back there, and the important word about, I didn't say Glazer, I said Glazers with an S. It's Brian, it's Joel, it's Darcy, it's Ed. They even have 2 more owners, Avram and Kevin. Okay, so there's 4 co-chairmen. There's 6 owners. This is not like Jason Light,
right?
Just going in to like talk to Woody Johnson or Mark Davis. This is there's a lot of people to talk to here. A lot of different opinions.
It's a thorough process.
It is a thorough process. You can't have a hung jury, right? You can't have, well, we're going to take a vote. No, it needs to be like fully coordinated here. You've got to have all the owners on board, Oh, and by the way, they're family too, Jay. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Right? You ever fight with your siblings? Do you agree
all the
on
time,
everything?
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying? It's a process. And I'm not surprised that a decision's been reached yet. We could be waiting a week or 2. We could be literally not knowing which direction this franchise is going to be going and who's going to be steering the ship for a couple days or a week or 2 now.
Scott, before I let you go, I got to ask you about the future of Lavonte David. I've been in that locker room after losses like you have. But when you see KJ Britt like in tears, you see Lavonte as emotional as I've ever seen him. I mean, he's been upset after losses before. But I mean, for him to get, and he's a very stoic, very calm, very soft-spoken individual. I just felt like in my gut, I was looking at a guy that just knew that it was over. What do you say about the future of Lavonte David?
I would say you're going to be 35. Father Time is undefeated. I'm famous for saying that. He comes for everybody. Lavonte has been doing a really good job of outracing him until now. I think if you look at the PFF grades, he slipped in coverage this year, and I think that's accurate. He's not the coverage linebacker he used to be. He is he's still a good tackler. He is still a very good blitzer. He's better going in drive rather than reverse. But does he need to be in park? And I don't know. That's a question for Lavonte. I appreciate that Rondé Barber didn't hang around too long. He got out when he was still good.
Nobody wants to see that aging boxer in the middle of the ring when he's lost his his right hand.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a part of me that if this was it for Lavonte, I would say, yeah, like retire. But it's a. I love Lavonte. I want to remember Lavonte for what I thought was a really good game against the Commanders. Like if that was it, man, you left it all out in the field. You got a sack on Jaden Daniels. You looked like little flashes of old Lavonte.
I thought he was the best player on defense for the team.
Yeah, he and Yaya Diaby.
Yaya was good too. But you look at Lavonte and you're like, part of that is what you said. Like, hey, look at you turning back the clock. But also the other side is like, damn, somebody else probably should have stepped up to help out this guy.
For sure. And so to me, I think that I would like to see some newer, younger, better, faster, more athletic linebackers. And the key word in everything I just said is better. And that's going to be tough because Lavonte, I think, is still a good player. Mm-hmm. But at 35, is he going to be better than he was this year? No, I don't think that in any stretch of the imagination, you're going to get a better version of Lavonte David. And then you're older. You're probably going to lose half a step or a step. This team has some real coverage issues in the middle of the field. Lavonte was part of the problem this year. Having said that, it could be worse. Right. Younger doesn't always mean better. Faster doesn't always mean better, too. There's something about instincts and football IQ and intangibles that matter, those unquantifiable things that the analytics guys can't quantify and grasp. So I don't know. If he came back, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But at the same time, if you can find somebody that was as good as Lavonte this year, that actually has more of an upside, that is younger, that would be here longer, that is faster, more athletic, Devin White's faster and more athletic than Lavonte. He's a terrible linebacker, though. You know what I mean? So
you got that right. And who knows, Scott, maybe a different defense next year. Maybe if Lavonte does come back, it puts him more in a position to succeed where he's not out on an island. Like, why is our 35-year-old linebacker one-on-one with the elite tight end in the league?
Right. And I think, Jay, too, for example, and I have not spoke to Liam Cohen about this whatsoever. This is just a scenario in my mind. Let's say they pull the switcheroo and Todd Bowles is out, Liam Cohen's the head coach. If you're Liam Cohen and the 34-and-a-half-year-old version of Lavonte David is your first exposure to Lavonte David up close and personal, right? You weren't here for the 7-sack season and the 5-interception season, and in the Super Bowl Lavonte, right? This is your first exposure to Lavonte. You look at it and you're like, probably do better at linebacker, right? Because he doesn't have the history with Lavonte that we all do, covering this guy since he was a second-round pick back in the day, and the decade of dominance that he had and getting snubbed by Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner, always being the NFC linebackers. Where if Lavonte was playing on playoff teams, he would have probably had 5 or 6 more Pro Bowls by now.
Right.
So that's the thing. It's like if I'm Liam Cohen, this is my team now. And maybe I'm completely wrong. I'm putting words in Liam's mouth here. I'm just looking at the scenario. Or if a new coach comes in, a new defensive coordinator comes in and didn't have any exposure to Lavonte, you look at that tape from last year and you're like, probably need to upgrade this position, right? So, good point, man. So there's a clinical X's and O's, eye in the sky doesn't lie. Part of it you have to look at. But if you're Jay Recher, if you're Scott Reynolds, if you're a Buccaneer fan out there, if you're Jason Light, who didn't draft the guy but re-signed the guy multiple times, and he was your dad's favorite player at Nebraska, you want him to stay as long as you can. But at the same time, the lights go out for everybody. The party's over, and so if this is goodbye, I thought he went out with a bang, and I hope that he becomes a wire-to-wire player. Mm-hmm. I hope he doesn't seek a deal elsewhere. And you see Bobby Wagner, right? Bobby Wagner recovered a fumble. He's leading tackler in Washington, still kicking, right? But Mike Allstott was a Buccaneer for life. Right. Rondé Barber was a Buccaneer for life. Derek Brooks was a Buccaneer for life. John Lynch wasn't. Warren Sapp wasn't. A couple of those guys in the Ring of Honor are true and true red and pewter or orange and white guys. And you'd like for Lavonte David to be one of those guys. You want Mike Evans to be one of those guys where it's just every year red and pewter Buccaneer through and through. And I hope that's the case. And the other thing too, I'll leave you with this. Lavonte David got a little dinged up at the end of the game, and maybe that is a little bit of a sign to him and say, you know what, I can walk. I don't have any debilitating injuries. I don't need a hip replacement. I'm not coming off a dislocated ankle like Chris Godwin is. You know what I mean? My arm's not in a sling from a pectoral injury like Christian Izien is. I'm walking. I walked away from the game. They didn't have to wheel me out. I'm not on crutches, right? I didn't go out with a career-ending injury. You know, my neck is okay despite all of the collisions that I've been in my dozen or 13 years, whatever, however long it's been. So there's that too. Maybe getting dinged up at the end of the game is kind of like, okay, time to go before.
That's right.
Before the worst case scenario might happen. You know.
Agreed. Scott Reynolds, Pewter Report. Check him out, pewterreport.com. Scott, appreciate it, man. You guys keep up the great work and have a great rest of your week.
You too, Joe. I love your show. Glad you're doing this. Encourage everybody out there. Subscribe to this guy. He's doing great work here in the Tampa Bay area. You know, love being on your show with you and Zach for years. And now I love being on your show here too. So wishing you continued success and can't wait to see you have to grab a beer sometime.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Scott. Have a great week, buddy. Bye.